Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. This is going to be a rare early edition of Truth Seekers, and we have done that to accommodate our guest today because there is something like a 6-hour difference. And our friend from across the pond, Phillip Mantle, is here. We didn't want to make him do an interview at 3 or 4 a.m. his time, which would be our usual broadcast time. So we're doing today's special early broadcast. It is rare that we get someone of Mr. Mantle's caliber. He's an incredible author, and I have just finished one of his books. And I just want to mention that I love it when I find a really good author that has written many books. I have digested the first one, which is on a subject that I love, which is the Roswell alien autopsy. His book, The Truth Behind the Film That Shocked the World, is an incredible journey into one of the greatest UFO frauds of all time. And it was just amazing to me to see the inside baseball. Mr. Mantle covered the entire thing, and you get to see some of what happened behind the scenes and hear exactly how they put this thing together. And in my view, how they perpetrated a fraud against all of us. I grew up with that story. I always wanted it to be true. And a lot of people felt that way. But Mr. Mantle has done an incredible amount of research into the characters involved, into the entire story. And of course, his book, the Roswell Alien Autopsy, The Truth Behind the Film That Shocked the World, is available on Amazon. Just search for his name, Phillip Mantle. But it's not just that book. He's got some more recent books, including one all about UFO landings in the UK. So let's welcome him here. Oh, 1 second. Let me do something here. We have to fix our background. There we go. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Mantle. Good to see you. Good to have you here.
Good evening, Steve. And please call me Philip. Philip.
Okay, Philip. Yeah. Okay, great. So listen, I don't even know where to begin because you have been into this thing for a long time. But I do want to ask you, because I ask everybody, what you've written all these books. You've been obsessed by some of this stuff, like me, for years, decades. What was it that got you started down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, good question. I mean, going back to when I was a youngster, Steve, and certainly as a teenager, I was always interested in all things paranormal. I was fascinated by astronomy. I followed the space race. I mean, we just celebrated the first moon landing. I remember that. I was 11 at the time, and I loved horror movies as well. And literally when I was about 13 or 14, I lived in an area in West Yorkshire. It's in the north of England, just outside of the city of Leeds. And my best friend's grandma used to live just over the street from us. And I used to go with her to the local spiritualist church. And I found it fascinating. I didn't necessarily agree with everything they were claiming, but, I was fascinated by it. And I was always the type of kid at school that would stick his hand up and ask the dumb questions that the teacher didn't want you to ask in the first place. I always wanted to know things. If there's a button that said don't press, I wouldn't press it, but I'd want to know what happened if I did press it,
Yeah.
And then I read one astronomy book, which had one chapter in it on UFOs and basically ignoring them or dismissing them. And I found that rather strange. So that lit the fuse. When I left high school with no qualifications, I went for one job to another. And then in late 1978, over the winter into 1979, I went to work in what was still then West Germany. Couldn't speak the language. So I phoned my mum and said, can you send me some books? I just meant any old books, Steve, because I could sit and watch the TV on a night, but I had no idea what they were talking about, So she sent me a box of books all on UFOs. So I would sit down on an evening and reading them. So when I came home, I got a bit more knowledge about the subject. And then the Spielberg movie came out, Close Encounters. And the city of Leeds, then as now, publishes an evening newspaper. It's called the Yorkshire Evening Post. And my aunt, who lived just round the corner, brought me a copy round one night. She said, have you seen this? And there was a small ad, and it was for the formation of the Yorkshire UFO Society. coming up that particular Sunday. So I didn't drive in those days. I caught the bus into Leeds, found the location that's mentioned in this advert, and there were about 20, 30 people there. And the Yorkshire UFO Society was formed by two brothers. That was Mark and Graham Birdsall. And they put on a presentation because they'd obviously been involved for a few years already. And that was it, Steve. I was hooked. You know, I felt I've just, you know, I just arrived at the right place at the right time. I felt like I'd come home, kind of thing. And that's how I started. And it all began with the Yorkshire UFO Society.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, it is, isn't it? It's like a comforting feeling when you find other people, right, that are interested in the same strange things you are. You feel a little less alone and a little, like you found your place, right?
Yeah, and they also had a big table selling more books, which was great because they were a rarity, especially where I lived. So
yeah, hard to come by, right?
Yeah, there was no internet in those days, no Amazon. So So we had meetings every Sunday, once a month, and I went to them all. I paid my membership fee, Steve. I think it was about £2, for the whole year. It was about $3 at the most, and it was worth every penny. And as we fell into the 1980s, again, quite by chance, certain areas in and around the county where I live. I'm from Yorkshire. It's split into 4 now, north, south, east and west. But it used to be just one. I'm in West Yorkshire. And there were areas that had a lot of UFO reports, and somehow they managed to find their way to us. So, I jumped in with both feet and away we go.
Interesting. And when did it become like obvious to you that you would begin to write books and do really serious research?
I never thought about me writing books. I wasn't a bad writer at school, but it never entered my thoughts. I just wanted to know more. Rather naively, Steve, I thought I'll read a few more books. I'll maybe write a few letters to various people, and that'll be it. I'll find all the answers that I'm looking for in no time at all. And boy, was I disappointed. Didn't work like that. So we were lucky, as I said, that we had a lot of reports coming from certain areas. So my next best thing was to try and confront the phenomena myself, if that was possible. And that was the intention of the organization as well, was not just to gather data from other individuals that had witnessed the phenomena, but to close and personal, see what it is. We saw something at a distance and never got up close and personal to it, but we certainly give it our best shot. And I didn't think this would ever take that long. I never crossed my mind to get involved any deeper than I did. But like I said, I just seemed to be in the right place at the right time, and things took off. It had, my involvement in the phenomena kind of had a life of its own, Steve. I never really planned an awful lot. I always found that when I try and plan something, so just run with it and see what happens, and that's what happened with me joining the Yorkshire UFO Society. And like I say, I don't regret it one iota.
Oh, that's very good. And I've put, just for the benefit of everybody watching or listening here, I have put a link to Amazon in the description of the video. I just finished one, and I gotta say I'm anxious to get some more of your books. But let's get into this alien autopsy, because here in was it huge in England too?
Oh,
because
it was huge around the world, Steve.
Yeah, Here in the United States, everybody was talking about it, and for once, I wasn't the dork in the room. Do you know what I mean? Like people all knew that I was into aliens and UFOs, so everybody was coming to me going, well, "Do you think it's real?" Look, and there was like watch parties. People had parties to watch it, and then they replayed it so many times.
Yeah,
people would have parties and watch it again and debate whether it was real or it was fake or it was a hoax, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a phenomenon. And again, the people behind the alien autopsy film, people have, have said, oh, they had a magnificent marketing campaign and all this lot. They have no idea what they're talking about. There was no marketing campaign. Once the genie was out of the bottle,
Yeah.
and that's it ran, and they just went with it. And nobody that was involved, including myself, ever thought anything like what did happen would happen. Again, we just had to go with it. You either dropped out of it or you ran with it. And I was right in the middle of it. So I didn't really have I've often said this damn film will haunt me to the day I die, you know, and I can't get away from it whether I wanted to or not. You know, it's just that's it.
Yeah. And so the book was pretty revealing about like some of the characters involved. And you know, I've often wondered, like, so do you think it was just intentionally faked?
Oh, it was.
Or do you believe this? Because the story that we get is, well, we had the real one and then it degraded and it fell apart. And it,
Well,
you know,
that's all nonsense. I mean, when we talk about the alien autopsy film, we're actually talking about 5 different pieces of film. Okay. First one is the tent footage. Lasts about 8 minutes. It's a creature laying on a bed or a blanket over it. You can see the head and the hands and the feet. 2 men in white coats, the other side of it, fiddling with giblets or whatever. And occasionally a man with his back to the camera walks in. It's static, is the camera. There's no soundtrack. That was the first piece of film that Ray Santilli showed to anyone, myself including. And he said this was the creature were recovered in the desert, and they put them in a field tent before they were transported elsewhere. So that's the tent footage.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
sounds like that's plausible, right?
Yeah,
but even that I would question, though, because if you had these bodies, would you just put up a tent for a while and pull them in a tent, or would you put them right in a truck and get them to a hospital? Or you know,
what I'll say is, at this point, I'd already been talking to Ray Santilli for about 1.5 years. He kept saying, "I'll show you the film." I can't. Yes, I can. No, I can't. So in the end, I told him to get lost. And I phoned him up just off the cuff one day, and he said, "Okay, come down. You know, he's in London. I'm up north." I made an appointment with his secretary. My wife and I went down, and here at last we had some film, and it was pretty poor quality, Steve. But I thought, well, at least I can confirm that film does exist, you know. And so here it was. Then Ray invited us down again, and we viewed 2 autopsy films. So the one you've all seen on Fox, that's one of them. There is another one that is slightly longer. It's the same location, same people, same creature. However, it's not damaged. There's no hole in the leg, etc. A slightly different medical procedure is carried out. And then you have the debris film, you know, the bits of junk that again were shown in bits in Fox. Then
I can't believe how many people have taken stills from that specific wreckage, you know, with the 6-fingered control panel and all this stuff. It's even after this is a hoax. It's still in newspapers, it's in articles, it's in blog posts, it's in videos, and people say, "Here's the proof of the Roswell wreckage." No, it's not, right?
Well, then Santilli got hold of an alleged interview with the cameraman. That was only ever released on Japanese television, but it is available. I have seen it. So there are 5 separate films in total. And but like you say, images from the alien autopsy film, they're like the go-to image now when any media outlet wants images of Roswell, because there is nothing of Roswell apart from the desert. So it's better than nothing. So, you know, how it all came about in 1993, I was, amongst other things, the press officer for the British UFO Research Association, a national organization here in the UK. And I had a letter, and it was from a company called the Merlin Group, just asking if we could assist with the making of a UFO documentary. So I wrote back, sent them some information, and the head of the mailing group was Ray Santilli. So we exchanged a few letters. This is, before email. And then I spoke to him on the phone. And then out of the blue, Steve, he said, well, Philip, I actually have footage of the Roswell. He called it Roswell to begin with. Crash. And I said, okay, show me. You made a bold claim there, out of the blue. Show me.
Yeah. And it's amazing, just so everybody is clear, like Philip saw all this stuff before it was on television, before anybody knew about it. He was in on this. Let me ask you, like, really, what was your reactions to seeing this stuff?
Well, like I said, the first film we saw was the tent footage, and it's really poor quality.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did, Steve, I asked Santilli, what is your intentions? What are you going to do with this film? And he said, I'm going to make my own documentary, and I'm going to release it on video. And you'll be able to buy it from me. You'll be able to buy it in your local video store. There were still video stores then, Blockbusters and so on. And he actually did that. So at that point, there was no television involved. I actually wrote the documentary for him. It was narrated by a famous UK actor called Brian Blessed. And but it was only when it was accidentally leaked to the media that then television became involved in a big way. And you have to remember, this is now 1995, and it was the X-Files was probably at its peak, the TV show, and this just happened to come out. Santilli didn't release it to the media. That was me. I just slipped up. A friend of mine who was a journalist. Now, what we'd done, I'd done an agreement, just a handshake with Santilli, to show it at our conference later that year, August 1995 in Sheffield. And we shook hands. There's no money, no contracts involved. And he said, yeah. So a friend of mine in Sheffield who was a journalist, you may know him now. He's now Dr. David Clark at Hallam University. David rang me and he said, I'm doing a little article for the local newspaper. Give me a quote about your conference for later in the year. So I said, blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, alien autopsy film. And he ran it in the local newspaper. A couple of days later, I got a phone call from a press agency called White's. And all they were interested in was the alien autopsy film. So I told them basically what Ray Santilli had said to me. I just quoted him. And then I wake up on the Sunday morning, my fax machine has been working overtime during the night. There were faxes literally from around the world, from television companies from around the world. I kid you not. The phone just went bananas. Look, they could find me in the phone book. But Ray Santilli, London businessman, they couldn't find him. So they came to me, and all I did was pass them on to Ray Santilli. I said, look, on my film. So that's when everything changed, Steve, and when the media became involved. It's when television became involved. On May the 5th, 1995, Santilli hired a theatre out at the London Museum and showed the film there to an audience. He even got that wrong, because we're expecting all this different stuff we've seen, but we saw one autopsy film. No introduction, no music over it, no narration. Unbeknown to us, Ray Santilli and his business partner were in a booth at the back, and they were actually got a written down script and were narrating it down the microphone, but they forgot to switch the microphone on. So they didn't know that the film had just got, but it didn't matter, because there was literally a scrum when the film had finished. Everybody wanted to know everything. Ray and his business partner legged it, ran out the back door. And I'm stood there thinking, where's everybody gone? And I was literally pinned to the wall by all these journalists with their microphones around me. And I kept saying, well, you should be talking to Santilli, not me. But he'd gone. And he'd gone to a local pub near his offices. And I think that's where the deal may have been done with Fox and Bob Kiviat, who was the producer. And that's how.
Yeah, maybe he sat back in a pub and just like Who's the high bidder? Fox, we're going with you. You know what I mean?
Well, Bob was there, you know, he and it all came from there. And it literally was shown eventually in 1995 in August. Ray did turn up at our conference, Steve, and showed it. That was the first time anybody had seen it anywhere, apart from me and a couple of others. And the place was packed. I mean, it was absolutely ram-jam packed. We had journalists there from around the world, but they were too late. Ray had already done a lot of his deals. It went out the next day on Fox. There you go, Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction. I'm in it. I'm in that, you know. And
yeah, and you know what? It seems to me to be this strange connection now, because I watched that so much growing up, and now you're right here. Yeah. And you've got the inside baseball of the whole story. Don't you think, though, that, listen, I'm not encouraging people to fake things or do hoaxes, but one thing I have to say is that they did have a certain attention to detail. In other words, like the phone in the room was from 1947. The clock in the room was some expert figured out, that was a 1940s era wall clock. Yeah. Like they really went to the mat to try to connect this to Roswell. Right.
There's nothing on the film that you see that you can point to and say that proves it to be a hoax. Nothing obvious anyway. You know, they weren't wearing a digital watch, for example, or you know. But I'll give you an example. On the May the 5th screening, which was at the London Museum, an invited audience only, there was a guy at the time who was very involved in Roswell research called Kent Jeffrey. And he was an airline pilot. And I got Kent a seat at the table, so to speak. He was in the audience. He came running out of the theater once he'd seen it, saying it's a hoax. We've got him. Because when you see the telephone on the wall, it's got a curly flex. He said they didn't have curly flexes in 1947. And he's shouting this out. But of course, when we checked with the museum, they did. You just had to, it was an optional extra that you could pay that bit more for, Steve.
You know? Yeah, a little bit extra. You get a curly.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting detail that he noticed.
Absolutely.
Right?
But Kent Jeffrey, shot his mouth off and made himself look a little bit foolish. And although he was very skeptical of the film, he went on to say he thought it was actually some kind of deformed human being that was on the slab. And so he called it a kind of a snuff movie, if you like. And there were all kinds, so by 95, you got the burgeoning internet, nothing like it is today. It was all green screens, the green, all that kind of stuff. So it was the first UFO argument that went online. It really was. And it went around the world. I mean, I got invited to go here, there, and everywhere. And I used to tell these people, I don't do this for a living. I have a proper job, and I have a wife.
Yeah, I can't just fly to your country to talk about this film, right?
Yeah, I remember being asked to go to Hong Kong, for the weekend. I said, I've got to go to work. I can't just turn up at the airport with my passport and fly to Hong Kong for a couple of days. I was even asked by a showbiz promoter to do a presentation all week at a theatre in London, once every evening and twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. And he offered me a large amount of money. And I said, I can't do it. He said, well, why not? I said, I've got to go to work. He believed, he was in the audience, watching the presentation. He thought this was my job. I said, no, I actually worked in a factory. I was a factory worker and a trade union steward. This was something I did,
on the side, side hustle,
elsewhere.
Right? Yeah. This is a side hustle at best, bro. I can't just drop everything and do a show. Yeah.
So when I
that'll show you the popularity. This thing was so popular that somebody knew that they could get somebody connected to this film to just do a presentation every night and fill a theater for weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe if I'd have had the time, I may have done it, but it wasn't possible. I had to go to work. I had a job. So when I met Santilli, I got to know him a little bit, and so I had to make a decision what to do, Steve, because it was quite obvious to me that if you rubbed Santilli up the wrong way, he would just cut you off. He wouldn't return your calls or your faxes or your letters. He did that with Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman faxed him a list of demands. And I mean demands.
Oh, I've never heard this.
Oh,
Really?
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I got I got Stan to speak with Santilli. He wasn't that impressed. So he literally a list of demands, not requests, not questions, but demands.
Well, that was Stan. He was pretty ballsy.
Yeah. Well, Santilli just said to me, "Who the hell is this fella?" He said, "It's my film. I'll do with it what I want." And he was right in that respect. So I decided that, in public and with Santilli, I would support him, but behind closed doors, I'd try and get to the bottom of it. And one of the reasons I invited him to speak at our conference was that I hoped that it would get out onto television and then people would be able to see it. And, it went far bigger than any of us ever dreamed. But so once it goes out on TV around the world, Steve, I'm sat there. It's like, right, the information's going to come flooding in. Somebody's going to come forward and say, that's me, I'm one of the actors, or film that in my studio, or I provided the props, or maybe the opposite. Some guy might step forward and say, oh, my grandfather told me all about this.
Yeah.
But
I think that was a smart way to play it, because like you said, you don't want to rub Santilli the wrong way saying you think it's fake. Better to put it out and let somebody else point out the problems with it.
But the thing was, nobody came forward. I mean, absolutely no one. So all we had to go with was the film as you see it. Santilli promised pieces of film for analysis. Bearing in mind where he actually lived was only a short drive to Kodak here in the UK.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I spoke with Kodak, and they said, we will analyze any film. We won't comment on what it depicts, but we'll analyze it for its date.
Don't you think it was a stroke of brilliance, though, to film that on old film stock so that when somebody tested the film, it would date to the right period? Well, I think that was brilliant of them to do that.
No, you're wrong. It wasn't filmed on old film stock. It was filmed on new film stock.
Oh, okay. So, but what did they do? They found old film stock to
they went. What they did, the man who made the film is Spiros Malaris.
Yes.
He's a filmmaker, a magician, an entrepreneur. And so he used his magician skills. What they did, they went down the market and they literally bought some old 1940s films, that one of which was a college baseball. And of course, the film has a leader on it. So they cut the leader off it.
That's what it is. I'm sorry.
Yes, all right. Yeah. And they spliced it to the 16 millimeter.
To the modern film. Yeah.
And of course, what Spiros did, one so-called specialist that stepped forward to try and analyze the film was Bob Shell in the States. He came to London. So they take the film to his hotel or wherever, won't allow him to touch it. And one of the great things that magicians do is misdirection.
Sure, absolutely. I know that.
Well, Spiros pulls the film out, holds it up in the air, and you can see the creature on it, but he's actually got his finger and thumb over the splice.
Yeah. Oh, so that's interesting.
So it's misdirection. So you were so excited to see this film. You're just looking to see the creature on it. Then he shows him the edge code on the leader, which is a black box and a triangle. You check that with Kodak, and they say that's our code for 1927, 1947, and 1967. So even that fit, So it was a brilliant piece of
stagecraft. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Spiros, I've got to know very well. He says it's the biggest illusion that's ever been created, because there are still people today believe it's real.
Yeah, I talked to him a few times, and he's a very interesting character, and he is very proud of the fact that he pulled that off, and that's a typical magician. You gotta stand back and marvel at the brilliance to put together an illusion like that, and that's what it was. And it's interesting that even I remember doctors and people that were very familiar with autopsies and anatomy were looking at that and saying that this looks like a real real
absolutely.
autopsy. This does
Yeah.
not look like a rubber creature, or it doesn't look like it's fake. It looks like, you know.
Yeah.
And,
I spoke to numerous surgeons and pathologists, or I wrote to them. Same with special effects artists. They all, to a man, said, "Yeah, we can make it." And somebody said it looks like this fella's work. So I've got the phone number of this guy. This is in England, and I ring him up. I said, "Do you have anything to do with this?" And he said, "No, but I tell you what," he said, "it looks like so and so's work." I said, "Have you got his phone number?" He said, "Yeah." And I'd ring this next chap, and I just went round in circles. It became quite clear that none of them knew who the hell had worked on it. Now, Spiros used his friend, and he's called John Humphreys. John isn't actually a special effects artist per se. He's a trained Royal Academy sculptor.
Yeah. So that's where the body came from.
Yeah. So his work on occasions had worked in film and television, but he is a sculptor. So he wasn't known in special effects circles.
Yeah, so it'd be difficult to find him. You're looking for a special effects guy that worked in horror movies or something, which is what I would have done.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. I mean, and of course, as a trained sculptor, he was trained in anatomy as well, so he was able to get the anatomical features right. Spiros's girlfriend went through the medical literature to tell about how such a procedure would be done, and so they formed a small team, and between them, they did it and pulled it off. Now, the reason there are 2 autopsy films, okay. I remember saying this too. You've all seen one on TV with a big hole in the leg. That's actually the second one. They made the first one, and they're looking back on what they've done, and it was Spiros's girlfriend. Bearing in mind she'd gone through the medical literature, she said, "That's a mistake. You've made a mistake with the medical procedure, and if you release that, everyone will know it's a fake." So they said, right, the money had run out. They'd spent the budget. So Spiros says, I'll pay the rest. We've got the mold for the creature. We'll make another one overnight. So they pump the stuff in or whatever it is they does. Come back the next morning, they take it out of the mold. There's a problem. There's a big hole in the leg. Got an air pocket. So Spiros uses his head, and they go to the butcher's. They get an animal bone, they stick it in the leg. You get they burn it, make it look. It's an accident. You know, these people have crashed, and that's the one you see. That's the one you see on the television. So that's
like
actually
I said, the attention to detail was pretty good.
Now,
and I like how they went to the butcher shop to get like guts and intestines.
I have a really good friend who spent all his life working in special effects. He was in New Zealand when all this happened, and now lives in the UK. And I asked him about it, and he said, as a special effects artist, you'd sometimes make your best work when you've got no budget or things have gone wrong,
Yeah.
And you have to improvise, and which is exactly what they did. So then we move forward in time, and Santilli all of a sudden changes his story. He said, well, the film deteriorated, and we had to recreate it, And the reason they did that because they had a movie coming out, and that was behind the movie. But he calls restore it, Steve. He calls it restoration. He said we still had a few frames left, and we restored it.
No, and just to be clear, I know somebody who's very big film buff, and he restores some film. And what he does is he takes the original film and through some sort of process cleans it. Sometimes there's dust or hairs on individual frames. He goes through frame by frame and cleans the film. That's restoration. Filming it all over again and then claiming that you put a couple of frames inside the finished restoration is not a restoration. It's a recreation.
Right? There's another great mistake in this theory. Let's say you're an art restorer, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a work of art I want you to restore. So you do your work on it. However, you wouldn't make another one that was different. because we have 2 alien autopsy films. They're both in the same room, same people, but there's a different procedure. One's damaged, one creature's damaged, the other's not. So Santilli now is kind of forgotten about the second one. He kind of says, no, what do you mean? There is no second one. But I'm not the only one that saw it. My wife was there with me. Maurizio Baiata from Italy also viewed it. The late
so you guys saw the prototype before they perfected it, right?
Yeah. We saw them both. So he can't lie. I'm not the only one. But so if you were restoring something, you wouldn't make an extra one just in case you messed up. And the extra one's a bit different to the real one, So that's where Santilli's story falls down. Big time.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, because maybe and you're one of the few people who may know. I was also going to ask this magician this, but I never got a chance to. The original molds, were they destroyed, or does somebody still have them? Because
no, the agreement they had with Santilli was that they'd get rid of everything. There was supposed to be no photographs taken of them making this either, but one has survived. We have a Polaroid of John Humphreys with the mold of the creature, and but he said we literally, even the creature, he says we chopped him up and we dumped them in various places. So it wasn't like take the creature's body and just dump it all in one place. They actually chopped it up.
That's a shame, because if somebody still had the molds and they could make some, I'd love to have one of those things.
Well, I said to Spiros, you sound like you're in the mafia, chopping bits up and dumping the body,
Yeah, imagine they had to chop. Yeah, like people don't understand this, but in order for this plan to work, Santilli was right. You got to get rid of all the evidence. So they literally, after they filmed this thing, they had to take this fake alien body and chop it up into little pieces, and they put it in dumpsters, I've heard, or places all over England.
Not only that,
pieces. There's alien pieces of a fake alien body all over England somewhere.
Well, Spiros built the set in his sister's flat apartment, because she was having it renovated anyway, so it was a bit untidy. So they built it in Camden in London. And that's where you see the alien. What is funny is these are the little stories that you hear. And Spiros said we'd made the first creature, we chopped it open, taken all the bits out of it, and we realized we'd done it wrong. We actually left it there on the slab. I said, we'll go and set the mold, for the other one, and we'll come back in the morning. When they came back in the morning, the front door was open. They'd actually been burgled.
Oh, Jesus, some burglar walked in and saw an alien laying on a table.
Spiros at first thought, oh, that's it, game over. Then he thought, well, no, a burglar can't go to the police and say I was breaking and entering this house last night.
Alien,
But he says, can you imagine the face of the burglar when he opened the door and this thing's laying on a slab with its head cut open and its guts cut open and all these giblets all over,
Oh yeah, I better get out of here before the guy cutting this alien up comes back, right?
Spiros was able to support his claims. I went to his home. He showed me the faxes from Kodak where they told him what edge codes were what. And he had a huge dossier of American military vehicles, because they intended to build a crash site as well with a UFO in the background, but they just ran out of time and ran out of money. So he even Spiros is quite a good artist in his own right, and
I will tell you this: being a former stage magician. He is incredibly talented, and I remember, when you see this thing, it takes a magician to construct it, because it is, and if nothing else, I respect the guy because he created a beautiful illusion, and he's right. I've built many illusions that I used on stage. Not one of the things I created ever took off like that. That was crazy.
Spiros never made any money from it. He said
that's unfortunate. Yeah.
He said the idea that they had was, we'll release this, and then in maybe 6 months or a year, we'll do a reveal. Ta-da! to show everybody how clever they were, and maybe they'd get some more work, because he was a little filmmaker at the time. John was a struggling sculptor. Ray Santilli kept coming back and saying, well, I paid a lot of money for the tent footage. He didn't. He's still trying to sell that as real to them. They didn't believe him. So he said, I need to make my money back. So they just went off and did their own thing. It was only when the movie came about and they spoke to Spiros, and Spiros said, hang on a minute, enough's enough here. It's about time we told the truth. He then looked into it and he couldn't believe what had happened. People think, well, he must have known what was going on. Well, he didn't. He wasn't in that world. By this time, he's running his own TV studio. He's working around the clock. He's not in the UFO world. And he decides enough's enough. He gathered information, and he actually phoned a friend of mine called Russell Callahan. Russell used to work on UFO magazine. He had his own little mag out at the time called UFO Data. Now, I got Spiros's first name from a contact, but Spiros meant nothing. I didn't even know what it was. It meant nothing at all. So Russ says, you phoned the wrong guy. It's Philip you should be speaking to. So Russell gave me the guy's phone number, and I rang him up. And I said, what's your name? He said, Spiros Malaris. As soon as he said Spiros, which is not a common name.
Yeah, that is a very uncommon name. That's very interesting. And then you knew you had him, right?
I mean, I have here, just by coincidence, the tapes. I actually recorded him on tape in case that was the only chance I got to speak to him. So I'm recording.
Yeah. Philip, has anybody heard that? And can I get a copy?
Well, I don't know, but I'm
gonna hound you for that, because I would love to broadcast that.
This is Spiros,
yeah.
And I've got all the missing pieces of the alien autopsy film in my head. I've got the jigsaw.
Yeah.
And he's filling in the missing spaces as I'm talking to him. So I said, I'm making notes. I'll come back to you and I'll ask you some more questions. And I did. And isn't it interesting that, listen, the lesson is you got to pay your co-conspirators right if you're going to do something like this, right? Because wasn't he sort of like, the impression that I got when I spoke to him was that he felt like he didn't get paid enough. It wasn't.
So he spilled the beans, right?
It wasn't necessarily get paid. It was the recognition.
Yeah.
He wanted recognition for what he still said is
creating it. Yeah.
Is the greatest, illusion ever created. And they were talking about this movie. And Spiros said, no, you need to tell the truth now. We didn't plan to defraud anyone, or certainly he didn't. Santilli had, he had once the media got involved, the pound signs were rolling. And like I said, again, Steve, it just took off.
Yeah,
it
was like a snowball rolling down the hill, and it just got bigger and bigger. And bigger.
Santilli always admitted his intention was to make money from it, but he alone, he will admit he won't tell you how much he's earned, but he's earned millions. He would never admit that that was his intention. He thought he was going to make millions. He didn't. He was just going to sell it on home video. That was his original intention. And he made that home video. I wrote it for him, like I said, and people bought it. I've got copies of it, and
I don't believe that I've ever seen that. I would like to see that just for the history's sake.
So
because that was sort of the first release, and then they went big with Fox and
it was so big on Fox they had to make 2 more specials.
I remember, yeah.
And
and they sort of milked it because the first one did so well for them ratings wise. I think that they brought, let's bring in some more experts and talk about it some more and do 2 more.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was the video sales afterwards. Santilli had part of those.
I remember buying it I remember buying the video because I wanted to watch. And then it was early, it was the 90s. So I took it to a friend who had a Amiga video toaster, and he did early digitizer, and he digitized for me just the autopsy portions and cut out all the people talking. And I watched that thing on loop, I remember that.
I've actually got it on high resolution Betacam as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I have that then transferred onto a CD, a DVD prop. Sorry, and I mean, it even went to Russia, Saudi Arabia,
and Asia. Yeah,
yeah, it went everywhere. And you still, I mean, it ingrained itself in popular culture, Steve. It was in The Simpsons, Seinfeld, the X-Files did their own version of the alien.
And then there was that, and then there was that sort of Hollywood. There was that sort of movie about it.
And there was the movie.
That was a very good movie. That was a very good movie. I thought it was enjoyable to watch.
It's not bad, but it's nowhere near the truth. The only truthful thing in that whole movie is the way it spiraled out of control, and they just raked in the money. They just took the money and went with it. That's about the only.
Yeah. Oh, but back to Spiros. Like, so you started talking to him, and he starts spilling the beans. Is that where the story starts to fall apart?
Well, it was already falling apart. We'd found the guys that made the whole genesis of the alien autopsy film. Started with a company called MK Music, and that's for Mick and Keith. And what Santilli used to do, his main business was music. He'd buy old 60s and 70s pop artists. He'd buy their back catalogs, or he would hire groups that were famous in the 60s or 70s and reform them and sing some of their songs again. So he was a buyer and seller and things like this. And he used to work with AK Music. I said MK, sorry, it's AK, Andy and Keith. And they used to make a number of things, including karaoke videos. So they used to meet and have little silly brainstorming sessions, just a bit of a joke. And Santilli said, wouldn't it be great if we had some Roswell footage? Now, one of the guys working for Keith, a chap called Keith Bateman, he happened to have a UFO book, and in it is Roswell. So Keith is a lovely, lovely guy. He's called Keith Bateman. He's got a wicked sense of humor, Steve. You'd love him. I mean, when I met him and interviewed him, I've never stopped laughing all day. So Keith and his colleagues went to a farm. The head of the alien is made from, one of the polystyrene heads you put a wig on.
Yes, I'm very familiar with those wig forms.
He put his son under the sheet, put an old sheet. It's filmed in a barn. He got himself and one of his colleagues and another fellow to put a white coat on. They played the doctor. And the guy you see walking in front of the camera is actually the farmer.
That's interesting.
And they made this tent footage. Originally, it is in color.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, they ran it through the computer, turned it into black and white.
Yeah, because it being in color kind of busts that it wasn't from the 1940s then.
They put scratches on it and what have you. Keith took it to Ray Santilli, said, here, have a look at this. And Santilli said, that's not good enough. Go away and get me a quote for how much it would cost to make some real good stuff. And Keith did that. And he'd come back with a quote for maybe 30,000, 40,000 pounds. Santilli said, I'll forget it.
It's too much, yeah.
But what he did, he kept the tent footage. And he used that as bait. The idea had then been implanted in Santilli's head. I've got Roswell footage, even though it's fake.
Yeah.
I've got it. He showed it to Reg Presley. Reg Presley was the lead singer of the Trogs, 1960s pop group, Wild Thing, Love Is All Around, all that. And Reg was a big, crop circle and UFO fan. And so he used that as bait. Now, in 1995, every year they have a TV festival in France. It's called MIPCON or something like that. So you have Spiros Malaris, who's got his own little film crew. He got a trade directory with all different businesses, and he sent them a fax saying, I'll be in Cannes at MIPCOM with a crew. We've got some spare time. If you need anything filming, we're there. Just by chance, one of those companies he sent the fax to was the Merlin Group. And I mean, he did that on purpose because they were close to where his location was. He bumped into Santilli in France. Santilli told him this strange story about this film he got from this military cameraman. Spiros had no idea what the hell he was talking about. So when he come back, he said, I'll link up with you. So he goes to Santilli's office. He sticks in the film, the tent footage, and Spiros says it's a fake. It's never been on film. This is video. This was shot on video because it was all video.
Oh, okay. And Spiros was familiar enough with filmmaking to know that it wasn't shot on film. It was shot on
Spiros
video.
is one of those guys who used to shoot his own little films as a kid,
Yeah.
And he said, it was Santilli saying, "Oh, I paid a lot of money for this," which he didn't. He didn't. And so Spiros is driving back home, and he knows his pal, one of his best pal at the time is the sculptor John Humphreys, and it's like the light.
He's
it's
like,
like that.
We can do better than that, right? That's what he told me. When he saw that original footage, he thought, there's no way I can't do better than that.
Yeah, so he had a word with John that went back to Santilli and said, we can do this for you, and we can make this, and this is how much it'll cost. Santilli didn't have the money. He borrowed it from his business partner, Volker Spielberg. So this is where you got rumors floating around in 1995 that Steven Spielberg was involved. It wasn't Steven Spielberg, it was Volker Spielberg, a German film guy. Nothing to do with
nothing
Steven.
To do with Steven, but interesting connection.
Yeah.
So neat coincidence, right?
Yeah, they signed a contract. They said they wouldn't release any information, say anything, do anything. And off they went and made it. And the rest is history. It really is. But it still goes on to this very day, Steve. There's people.
There are still people. Listen, there is a Facebook group, and it's like all about the alien autopsy. And I've spoken with the person that runs it, and he's still convinced that that's real footage, and no amount of, showing him things or explaining things or quoting from your book or other debunks of it will convince him. He's absolutely convinced it's real footage and that there's some kind of cover up. They made Santilli say it was fake, because it got too popular. One of the questions I wanted to ask you about was this cameraman interview. Wasn't that a mistake? Because the story starts falling apart. Suddenly they interview somebody and say this was the cameraman. But can you tell us more about that interview?
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of the story.
I mean, now the film's gone out around the world. Santilli says, I bought it from this cameraman. I paid cash, and I'm not allowed to reveal his name. He needed the money for his granddaughter's wedding or whatever. He gave out a number of fake names for him. And so he was under pressure to deliver more. This was big money they were talking, Steve.
Yeah.
And he even got a guy to ring me one night. He said, the cameraman's going to ring you, Philip, at home at this time. I can't remember the date now. And
that's interesting.
The phone rings. There is an American sounding gentleman on the other end of the phone, not telling me an awful lot, but he claimed to be the cameraman. And so again, Santilli gets hold of Spiros. We need a cameraman's interview, and they actually went to Los Angeles with Santilli's business partner Gary Shoefield, who was there but didn't have anything to do with it. Spiros found an old guy on the street, literally living rough.
This is why I love this story.
And he said,
basically, they took a homeless man and paid him and gave him a script and told him to answer these questions. Right?
Yeah, and they said, do you want to earn a couple of $100 and spend the night in a hotel? So they spruced him up a little bit. They put him a fake nose on just for the sake of it. And TV producer Bob Kivier had sent a list of questions. Okay, so they just wrote the answers out for this guy, and he just sits there, and an old boy with glasses on, and reads the answers. And just by chance, this guy had actually been an actor back as a young fella. He's actually called Moose Carlson, and Spiros even found one of the movies that he was in. You know, he got a little clip from it.
That's pretty interesting that they.
So he takes it back. They actually hand deliver it to Bob Kiviat. They make him fly from New York, I believe, to somewhere. I don't know if it was LA, and they claim that it's the cameraman's the cameraman's son is handing over the interview, and you know, Bob knew the game was up. He said, "This is all, you know, nonsense."
He saw through the deception.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, this was now filmed on video, not on film. So you get a copy of this, you stick it in your video recorder, and you can turn the contrast up and the brightness, and you can see the man's face. You know, so the only place it was sold to was a TV company in Japan. So that's the only place that anyone would broadcast it. The game was up as far as sales were concerned. It just didn't hold water, and that was the end. So there's 5 films in total. There's, you know, the tent footage, 2 autopsy films, the debris, and the cameraman's interview. So that when we talk about the alien autopsy film, it's 5 films in total, and 4 were made by Spiros, 1 was made by Keith Bateman, and it just goes on and on and on. I literally, out of the blue, received an email from Ray Santilli last week. I can't disclose what he's talking about, but it's nothing fantastic, you know. But it was I hadn't emailed him. I hadn't spoken to him. I haven't even thought about him. You know, I don't wish him any harm. And
no, I get the sense from you that you were involved, but you wanted to know if it was real or not. Right?
Well, you
weren't trying to hurt him, but
no,
you know.
I sat down with Santilli one day. We went for lunch. I was in London with him, and I said, "Ray, I'm going to get to the bottom of this film, wherever that may be." And he just said, "That's fine, Philip." You know, so it was never personal. You know, I didn't let it get personal. Some people did. Some people accused me of being involved in making it. You know, I was Santilli's co-conspirator. I tell you how that came about, Steve. Bear in mind, I'm married at this point with 2 young kids. Me and my wife built an extension on our house.
So the money must have come from your co-conspiratorness.
There you go. They're saying,
addition on your house.
Phillip Mantle works in a factory. Where does he get that kind of money? It must have come from Santilli. Well, they forgot to ask. It wasn't my money. It was my wife's money.
Yeah,
she'd had her own property before we met. She now sold it, and we used some of the proceeds from that house to build.
Besides that, you know, women have a way of squirreling money away, don't they?
Well, yeah, but
they really do. They, you know, like I'm so thankful. My wife, when we have like some kind of major emergency, like the furnace needs to be replaced, there's just the money is there, and I don't know how she does it, but she.
Well, it was either move house or build an extension, and the cheaper option was to build the extension, and it was my wife's money, not mine. But you know, these idiots said, "Oh, he must be getting paid, you know, zillions by Santilli." The only thing Santilli paid me for was to write his documentary, which I did. I wrote his documentary. I provided him with contacts where he could buy license interviews for it and things like that, and that is it. You know, I got a small amount of money for that. We never even talked about money. There was no, you know, when he showed it at our conference, there was no money involved. You know, we just shook hands on it, and that was it. And he turned up, much to my amazement, I might add, but he did. He turned up, you know, and the rest is history, Steve. And it's
I did want to ask you too about this, you know, because recently this has been in the news again because so Santilli has never admitted that it was all faked, right?
No.
And he's claiming that it was a recreation, and he did have the original film. And his latest claim is that he's selling 1 frame of the real film as an NFT. Can you tell us about that and what happened with that? Was it sold?
What happened? Spiros claimed copyright of the alien autopsy film. Because the one you see on television was the second one they made that actually run out of money. So not only did Spiros film it, he paid for the crew and the and the body and the alien. He paid for that out of his own
Oh, I
pocket.
think he's got a valid claim then that he owns
So he
that footage.
claimed the copyright of it. So when Santilli put a frame of it up for sale, it's actually Spiros's copyright. And he contacted the company and said, "No, that's my copyright. You can't sell it." So they took it down. But then Santilli would put it up again and take it down again. He didn't sell it. He didn't sell it.
And he was looking for like $1 million payoff, right?
Oh yeah,
I heard him basically say that would be his last hurrah, and he was going to retire, Santilli.
Yeah, I mean, he still runs his business. I know that, but long before all this, I mean, we're talking years ago now, Steve. There were a couple of gentlemen in the States who contacted me and wanted to buy the film from Santilli for $1 million. And I said, "Don't, guys, it's fake. It is fake." And they're thinking they're going to get this whole reel of film, not just a couple of frames or a frame. They're thinking what you see on, Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, that all that is available. And I said, well, even if it was, it's still fake. And in fact, it is available, but it was filmed in 1995, not in 1947. And you can't age the film to con people, And so thankfully, Santilli wouldn't have sold it anyway. He couldn't, because once they got it, they would be able to have it tested and it would be fake. So I said, don't go anywhere near him. It is a fake. And so thankfully they didn't. But Santilli is still, if he gets one, I mean, out of the blue, again, it's going back some years. I got an email from him, Steve, saying, "How about Alien Autopsy, the movie? The musical."
Oh God, they're going to make a musical out of it? Jeez.
Well,
talk about cashing in. And some of me though thinks that Santilli's a little bit greedy, because he's already made so much money off of this, and it was purely through deception that he was able to make that money. He would have made millions if he would have been honest and said, "Hey, well, we just made this in somebody's flat, with the sculptor and this and that." He wouldn't have made that money. So he made the money through deception. And even after all that money, it's not enough for him. He's still trying to cash out one more time.
Oh, absolutely. And if he finds a way of doing it, he'll do it, Steve. I guarantee it.
Well, I have often thought that if he did a documentary completely coming clean and saying, yeah, Spiros, him and Spiros, I'm sorry. It's a weird name. It's hard to say it right.
Okay.
I always do that. I say Spiros, not Spiros. So I'll go with you because So if he and Spiros got together and did a documentary and bring in everybody that was working on it, Spiros' sister, his crew, and all just tell the story, that would make $1 million probably, because it's one of the greatest hoaxes that has ever been perpetrated on the public in the world, right?
I think it is the world's greatest hoax. I mean, if you think about hoaxes, you got the Hitler diaries.
That was a great one. I remember that one. That was a great one.
You got Piltdown Man going back, and but this purely monetary value, purely on the amount of money it made, must be the world's greatest hoax. Because then it went into a Warner Brothers movie as well. It is firmly implanted in popular culture. The Hitler diaries aren't, the hoax, Loch Ness Monster photographs are not, but this damn thing is, and it crops up everywhere. It's the go-to pictures. I knew a guy who run a picture library at the time, and he said, "Has Santilli signed up with a picture library, Philip?" I said, "Not that I know of." Why? He says, "Well, he's going to lose a lot of money because
people are just taking it under fair use." I guess.
He said, if he signs up with a picture library and signs a contract, our lawyers will hunt everybody down, and they either pay the fee or they get fined.
And Philip, I don't know if you're aware, but it wasn't just, there was copycats that came out after. There was one that we busted really badly called Alien Interview, which was reported to be a video that was stolen out of Area 51, and it's got what I believe is a puppet. And I wasn't able to find the puppeteer, but I was able to find a crew member that filmed it and said, yes, it was a puppet. We filmed it. They filmed that in a garage. Yeah, and that was also on Fox. And then the interesting thing is the character Victor, who was supposed to be the one who stole it out of Area 51, they put him in shadow. And it's so interesting that the person asking him the questions and the voice of Victor, once you take the voice disguise off, are the same person. He's interviewing himself about stealing the thing, and we've traced it to the producer of that being the voice, and he wouldn't grant us an interview. He also created that film Teen Wolf besides this alien interview, and so but they didn't make anywhere near as much money, but it still enabled. The Alien Autopsy was so popular that Fox started looking, and other opportunists said, let's do something similar and cash in, but nobody was quite as successful as them.
No, there are lots of copycats, most of which were done for a bit of fun. But you could buy Alien Autopsy, the board game, Alien Autopsy Operation.
Oh, that's interesting. I never saw that.
There are toys and games. I've got some of them here. Even today, there is a modern version of it coming out. It's not that long ago. I mean, I know you guys in the States, you celebrate Halloween in a big way. You could buy Alien Autopsy cakes for Halloween. And when you cut them open, all the blood run out. They became shaped like the creature on the slab, and all kinds of other things.
They're missing a business opportunity. They should get royalties from the cake companies.
Well, I'm only surprised that Santilli didn't go down that route. I don't know what happened. But there must have been a miscommunication somewhere along the line. But there's even Alien Autopsy, the magic trick that you can buy. I think it's a pack of cards. I don't know what it is.
I've seen it. Yeah, you're right.
So it's spawned. I've got a couple of models that were built of it. So it spawned a little cottage industry as well, and that's why probably Santilli will never get sued for fraud, because everybody he sold it to or licensed it to all made their own money out of it. I mean, can you imagine how much money Fox will have made out?
Yeah, there was an interesting question in the live chat. I know that you don't have exact numbers, but do you have some idea or estimate of how much money in total Santilli made off of this thing? It's in the millions at least.
It's millions. It's 10 million plus.
Wow.
Because
Phillip, me and you ought to find some old film stock. We really should find some old film stock and a sculptor, because $10 million is $10 million.
Yeah, and I don't think we'll ever know. Here's a little coincidence for you, right? In the middle of all this, I'd taken ill. I had a heart attack in 1999, so I had to.
Sorry to hear that.
It's okay. I had to come out and work.
Well, you look great today, and congratulations for.
I had to leave the factory, and I ended up working for a lady by the name of Heather, and she ran a small little publishing venture from her offices at the back of her home, and I was working for her. And she knew of my involvement in all this, especially the Alien Autopsy. And she said to me and the other guys that work there, my boyfriend's coming today. Now, we'd never seen him with a man. Anyway, this businessman turns up. We have lunch in the place. And he said, Philip, Heather's been telling me about your involvement in the Alien Autopsy films. Yeah. Now, this guy was a trained barrister. Okay, but he'd never worked at what called the bar, so he'd never worked in court with the funny wig on and all that lot. He says, I actually do contracts. Contractual law is my speciality. And he literally opened his briefcase, Steve, and pulled out the contract and said, have a look at this. And it was the contract for Ray Santilli and Gary Schofield for Alien Autopsy, the movie. There was the contract. And he allowed me to read it. I wasn't allowed to copy it, so I crammed as much as I could into my head. Later that year, I met Santilli and Schofield in London, and they sat there, thinking, aren't they wonderful? And I told them how much they were going to make on the movie.
Oh, and that had to be a shock to them that you already knew, right?
And they didn't know what to say, Steve. And then I played them at their own game. Now, Santilli had a couple of ladies work for him, like secretaries. One was called Sarah, one was called Sandra. I met them all. I chatted to them, and I said, Sandra and Sarah don't work for you anymore. I had no idea if they did or not, Steve. I had no idea. I just guessed. And I says, I've actually interviewed them. and you'll be amazed what they've told me. Now, they hadn't. I hadn't interviewed them at all.
So you bluffed him, right?
So I played him at his own game. I'd got these facts right about how much money they were going to make on the movie. So I just followed it up. And I said, the only thing is at the moment, guys, they won't allow me to publish what they've said. As soon as they give me the green light, your game is over. And Santilli just laughed it off, saying, oh, the disgruntled employees, you know, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's going to explain it away, yeah.
But you should have seen their face, Steve, when I told them what their cut was on the movie. They nearly passed out, you know, and that was all from my boss, who I was working for at the time, and her boyfriend. And I was spot on. The movie came out, you know, we knew the budget, we knew how much they got to make the movie, we knew the director, we knew everything. I even got in touch with the film company that were making it in London. They were called QWERTY Films. And I got in touch with one of the executives. I spoke to her on the phone to begin with, and then we swapped emails. And I know that movie companies will not tell you what they're making. They won't say anything about a project until it's ready to go. So I didn't ask any questions about it. I just did like chit chat. And then one day I just dropped in a little question. And I said, you might be able to answer this, but I understand if you can't. Who's doing the special effects for you? She says, it's John Humphreys. He's making the dummies for us. And
he made him a second time.
And he made them for Santilli as well. She told me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in the movie, he made the molds again to make a copy of the creature.
She told me he made them for us, and he made them for Santilli as well. I said, thank you very much. And you know,
well, you know what's interesting then is that maybe the original that was used in the Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction and all that molds aren't available, but I bet you that movie company may still have those molds from the movie.
Well, John actually had some in his workshop.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he made extra heads and things like that. And this was a time that he was still talking in a way. And we found out that his wife had said, he had one in the house. She said, you know, get rid of it. So I actually offered to buy one from him. I said, because as you can see behind me, I've got a little collection of stuff.
Yeah, that's a big, this was a big story in your life that you were involved in.
I'll buy a head. If you've got an alien, because we've got some photographs of him working on these dummies for QWERTY Films. We've got pictures of him, you know, he's in his workshop. But he stopped talking then. I think Santilli said, you know, keep quiet kind of thing, please, John. And he's gone along with that, you know, but I would have bought one from him, just not to expose anything. Say I've got one, you know, from the movie. It's a collectible from the movie.
Yeah, that's that would be quite a souvenir. I want one too, so I totally understand.
There you go.
You know, I want the whole body. I would stand it up in a case.
Well, he's got a body because I don't know what year it was. It maybe 5-10 years ago now, Steve. A Russian film crew came here. And they interviewed me about the Alien Autopsy film. Their next stop was Ray Santilli. So they interviewed Santilli in his office and he's showing them stuff. And then they went down to where John Humphreys lives and interviewed him. And guess what? He's got the whole body laid out. You know?
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah,
because they sent me a copy of the film they made
when they finished it. Yeah,
when they finished it. It's all in Russian, you know, but I can see things. Because my friend and colleague Paul Stonehill in the States is originally from the Ukraine. He gave me a rundown of what's on it. He didn't translate it word for word, but he speaks Russian and he understands it. And so we know from that you know that is still although certainly was a dummy still lying around somewhere. But you never know what's going to happen next with this damn film, Steve.
Yeah, you never know. There could be a part 2. Somebody will find more footage or something, you know, make another $10 million. And I want to remind people that if you're interested in this, this is an excellent book that Phillip Mantle has written, Roswell Alien Autopsy, The Truth Behind the Film That Shocked the World. And just as he's telling these inside baseball stories, there's an awful lot more in this book and it's very detailed. Everything you've ever wanted to know about that, how they did it, the Spiros involvement. It's just an incredible story. And I also wanted to ask you, so this flying disc press, that's kind of this is kind of a subculture, right? But you have a whole publishing company now based around UFOs and aliens and strange stories, right? When did that begin for you?
Well, in 2015, I've done all kinds of things. I've been a magazine editor, and I know people all around the world, Stephen. And a colleague in Poland said, Philip, my spoken English is pretty good, but I'm trying to brush up on my written English. Can I send something I've written for you to have a look at? So he sent me this thing on email, and it was actually a manuscript. He's a UFO researcher and a magazine editor himself now in Poland. So I read it, and I gave him some feedback on his written English. It was pretty good, actually. And I thought, this is a pretty good book, So this is going back 7 years. And I have a friend called John Hansen. John is a former police detective, and he runs his own little publishing company called Haunted Skies.
That's what I knew the name. I knew the name.
Yeah, I
know that. I have some of his books. Yeah.
So John was saying, well, why don't you publish it? I said, well, look, I'm pushing 60. I've only maybe got 6 or 7 years left, and that with me retired. So I need something to do when I retire. And my plan was to wait until I'd retired and then do it then. But John, gave me the rundown how I could do it. So I took the leap, and I published UFOs over Poland under the banner Flying Disc Press. It was a very steep learning curve, Steve, but it sold pretty well.
And it's interesting. I don't have that book, and I'm going to get it because I'm Polish and I don't know anything about UFOs in Poland.
My stepfather was
other than the Nazi Bell story. That was
my stepfather was from Poland, and then I followed it up with another book called UFOs over Romania, and that did okay. So I was up and running, and then a couple of years down the line, I got the chance to take early retirement. I work for a bank now. Please don't hold that against me. I had to.
Phillip Mantle's probably in the Illuminati too. He was a banker.
After I took ill, I had to come out of the factory and get an office job, and I ended up in the bank for my sins. But so I took early retirement and threw myself into Flying Disc Press. And we've had some success. We've had 2 Amazon bestsellers.
Yeah, you were telling me. Congratulations. That's
we now have
an easy thing to do. Get a bestseller on Amazon.
Well, we also have Flying Disc Press in France. So some of our books are now published in French. We also have it in Latin America. So some of them also make it into Spanish. And we've done agreements with German and Italian publishers, and we have one in Japan. We had one in Russia. One of my books come out in Russian. So there's more to come. I've got more books coming out this year. We're planning things for next year. When I say planning, I use that very loosely.
I know the feeling. Yeah, I've been planning a book for 2 years.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing in that, Steve. Come on.
I got an outline.
But 2 years is nothing.
Yeah.
Now, my latest book, UFO Landings UK, that only got written because we had the lockdown. I've been sat on that book for years, Steve, thinking I'll finally get this done. But once the COVID lockdown came,
everybody had a little bit more time, right?
Well, it was either that or bury my wife under the patio, So, I kept busy and wrote the book, and that's out now. But we know there's a lot of interest in the UFO subject. We know there's still interest in the alien autopsy film. I'm just a couple of years back, I made my own little documentary series on the alien autopsy film. And that did pretty well. It wasn't for me. I did it with another company, and they've been extremely pleased with it. And I'm working on other stuff with them. So the interest is certainly there. Whether we like it or not, this damn film's never going to go away.
Yeah, and I also we have to mention we did this story largely based on information that you had amassed and collected on Nick Pope. And I wanted to get your sense, all over the United States media, they always say Nick Pope ran a British UFO program. And I believe they do that falsely based on his own claims. And we've shared a lot of the stuff that you've collected over the years that seems to indicate he just answered the phone. He didn't investigate anything. I mean, what is your take on that? And what is the perception in England? When he's called the British UFO expert in the United States, what do people in England say? Do they know that this is all a LARP?
Well, I mean, Nick has his followers, and I understand that, but most people in the know here know that it's not true. But you don't have to believe me or you. You can just go to the Ministry of Defence and they will tell you. You can check all their files have been released to the public into our National Archives, and that's where I got the documents from. I haven't pulled these out from pulled a rabbit out of a hat with MOD documents. They're all there. Anybody can see them. They're not top secret. And I'm one of the guys that used to bug Nick Pope when he was actually at the MOD.
Yeah, that's interesting, is that some of those documents you're aware is him and his handwriting, even though his name is redacted because he was working there at the time, and that was you asking the questions that generated those documents.
Yeah, the thing about Nick, he was different to his predecessors and those that came after him. He was just much more helpful. He didn't have to be. This wasn't MOD policy. It was just him as a personality.
And don't you think that maybe, look, he was just interested in UFOs before he worked there. So once he's in a position where people are talking about UFOs, he feels like he's investigating. But I think the word investigating to me doesn't mean you answer the phone and then you forward it to, what is that section? There was a certain section.
There is another department, or there was, it's not there now, and it's called DI 55, Defense Intelligence 55. Yes. They dealt with a lot of things, but basically when UFO reports went into Nick's department, which is called the Secretariat, Air Staff.
Yeah, and Philip was nice enough to even send me the definition of secretariat so that I would know.
Which is, it's admin, it's administration.
Yeah, and I had mentioned that I worked at one corporate place where like 4 or 5 of us guys that were working there had one admin assistant, and they did things like go get me a file, answer the phone.
Well, what Nick would do when they got a report in, he would copy in the various departments, the main one being DI 55.
Who actually investigated the stuff, though, right?
On occasion
they did.
You're talking a handful of times per year, but all they were looking at, Steve, was to see if these reports were enemy aircraft. In other words, the Russians.
If it's a defense problem, they're interested. If it's not, they're not interested.
And they've openly said that from day one. I mean, that was MOD policy across the board. On occasion, they would look into certain reports and they would conduct an investigation. But they didn't tell Nick Pope the results because he was too far down the ladder. These guys were well above him. I'll give you an example. There is a Ministry of Defence, I'll call it a report, a study, and it's called Project Condign. And it was done by a chap called Dr. Harrow. Now, when you read the Condign report, you won't find his name on it. There's no author's name on it. And it basically looked at what they were calling then UAPs. And it was published internally. It was classified to begin with, I think in the year 2000. Because it was classified, Nick Pope's department didn't get a copy. They were not on the circulation list.
So he was so far down in the chain, he didn't even get classified internal documents about UFOs.
Now, Project Condign is a lengthy report, and Dr. Ron Haddow was a lifelong MOD guy. I think he started off as a pilot in the 50s, and his conclusion was that these were unknown balls of plasma that may affect, aircraft, etc., etc. But that doesn't matter. The fact was Pope's department wasn't even copied in. It was Dr. David Clark who found out about the Condon report and got it released under the Freedom of Information Act.
And see, to me, that right now, what you're talking about is very telling, because this man, Nick Pope, claims that he ran the British UFO program. If he did, he would be given access to these reports and these internal documents as the head of a UFO program. But everything that I've looked at seems to indicate there was people that were in charge of investigating. But you're right, only when they felt it may be related to a defense issue.
Yes.
And also, Nick Pope, on the record in a previous bio on his website, claimed that he investigated alien abductions, crop circles, and cattle mutilations for the British government. But we have from the British Ministry of Defense a letter confirming that they have never investigated alien abductions, crop circles, or cattle mutilations. I mean, there he's lying, and he's never investigated that.
You also have some correspondence by Nick Pope himself saying, there are no crop circle reports in the MOD files. And then there's another document written by Nick himself saying that the kind of reports that the chap who'd written to him are talking about, i.e. close encounters, they don't tend to receive. And he actually advises the correspondent to contact some civilian UFO groups, and he lists them.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense, because if he was, it's all about perceptions. He puts out this perception, or he wants people to have the perception that he was some kind of British Fox Mulder, and he ran out into the field and investigated crop circles and alien abductions. And it's very clear that they didn't investigate. That's not a defense issue. They had no interest in investigating them.
No,
but it's unfortunate, but like we have a very similar parallel here in the United States, because you've got Nick Pope saying, I ran the British UFO program. I was the head of it. And then we find out, no, you didn't. And that didn't exist. You were a secretary. And in the United States, we've got Elizondo saying that he ran a $22 million UFO program that we now know never existed and was not funded.
Yeah, well, I always say, look, you don't have to believe me. The documents that I'm talking about, I've shared some with you, Steve.
Yeah,
they're all available in the MOD files. And I don't know if they are now, but during the pandemic, all these files, you could download them free of charge.
Yeah, and I thank you, because I had pieces of that puzzle, but Phillip Mantle had a collection. He had a whole collection, and I put up most of them in a Google Drive link. After this broadcast ends, I'll put the Google Drive link to all the evidence and proof that Nick Pope never ran a UFO program for the British Mod. Will be right there in black and white for you.
So you've had people coming to me saying, well, you're just jealous of Nick Pope.
I've heard that. And I can see how people could assume that, because you're both British. I said,
look, I have my own little niche, whatever you want to call it. I am quite happy with where I am. I love doing what I do.
You didn't lie to people about your jobs to get there.
I said I left school with no qualifications. I have none. I mean, zilch. I worked in a factory, and I'm proud of that. I was a factory worker.
My family's all blue collar union
workers. I was a trade union representative. I was well trained by the trade union, and then I took ill, seriously ill, and I had to, after a couple of years, I had to find an office job. Like I said, I ended up working for the Halifax Bank, and I'm very grateful. It saw my daughter through university and paid the bills.
Oops, sorry about that.
So is that the ice cream van arriving, Steve?
No, that is my. I have alarms set for everything, Phil, because I forget. That's just my son in another hour is going to be home on the bus. So
okay. So 10 years after I had the heart attack, I went down with heart failure. That nearly flaming killed me. And I've had other heart problems. So I've been in and out of hospital. So there is no way I could run around like Nick Pope does. So I'm not jealous. It's nothing personal. Nick spoke at one of the conferences I helped organize. He stayed in my house as a guest.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is that obviously this man has an intense passion and interest for these subjects. I just think where he went wrong is overstating and embellishing and fabricating a story for his background that would then get him more bookings, more fame, more money.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for me. You know, it's a real problem for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sad.
If he hadn't said any of that stuff and faked stuff in his background or claimed that he investigated things he clearly never investigated for the British government, if he had just said, like you, Philip, I'm just a citizen of the UK. I'm very interested in these subjects. I've been researching them for 20 years or whatever. I would be much more agreeable to listening to him and to.
Yeah, I think from what Nick's job actually did, bearing in mind, some guy wrote to the Ministry of Defence and said, "How can I apply for the job?" And they said, "Well, it's internal." And they sent him, they said, "Well, what does it entail?" So they sent him a list of what it entails, and it's all admin tasks. That's all it is. You know, other things that Nick never talks about. Is
and what people don't realize, too, is that a lot of his job was that administrative and secretarial. Like a British airplane is, let's say a British airplane is going to fly to Poland. They need a place to land. They need clearance to land. There's paperwork that needs to be done. That's what he did.
It's the civil service. You know, politicians come and go, but you can have a job in the civil service for all your life. And he did indeed spend 21 years in it, you know, and he took early retirement. And he is a nice guy. He's very affable. But if you're on the wrong side of him, that's different. And
based on the sock puppet accounts that are currently attacking me on Twitter, I think I got on his wrong side. And it's always interesting to me. I don't know if you know this, Philip, but every time, at least here on this show, when we show people the truth about one of these characters in conspiracy land, suddenly a brand new nameless, faceless Twitter account comes at me on Twitter to defend their honor and tell me how wrong I am. It's never a real person that defends them once they're revealed to be the frauds or the liars that I believe they are. It's always a fake, brand new Twitter account.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. I mean, and that's just the way it is. And I've said, look, you don't have to believe me.
Read the documents. Yeah.
You asked for them, Steve, and I sent you them. I think they were there the same day or the next day. And
absolutely.
Make of them what you will. And, but that's it. Like I said, don't believe me, go to the ministry. And people will say, well, you can't believe the Ministry of Defence.
Yeah, because the Men in Black covered up his investigation.
Hang on a minute. Yeah. Hang on a minute here. You can't believe the Ministry of Defence, but you want to believe a former Ministry of Defence employee.
Yes.
Come on. It doesn't quite work that way. But people don't want to have their illusions shattered. They think there's some secret department in the MOD has been up to all this, that, and the other. And if there is, we haven't found it. We do know that DI-50. I tell you how we found out about DI-55. It goes back a long time, Steve. We would write letters to the Ministry of Defence trying to get access to this, that, and the other. More often than not, we failed. But it was my colleague, Jenny Randalls, who'll notice on a letter that I'd got from the MOD their distribution list.
That's interesting. So they screwed up.
Yeah. And it wasn't me, it was written to me, but I hadn't noticed it. Jenny noticed it. She said DI-55. She then started to look into where the hell, who's this DI-55? And then we found out, it took a long time, but they're gone now. That department is dissolved. It may have another name, move somewhere. Pope's department, again, was closed in 2009. So you can't get any set. If you write to the Ministry of Defence, it's forwarded on to someplace somewhere else. They don't even reply themselves anymore. And they are genuinely not interested. People don't believe it. They're genuinely not. They openly
unless it's a defense issue, then they're interested. Yeah.
They've openly said, however far back you go, that's it. They look at it just from a defense point of view. They'll admit. They've always admitted that there are things in the air that they can't explain.
Sure.
But if it's not a defense issue, we really don't give a shit,
Yeah.
and that's it, and people don't want to believe that. Well, if they don't want to believe it, I can't force them.
And I wanted to ask you before we finish, because this is going to be the next book of yours that I'm going to read. This is UFO Landings UK. Can you tell us a little bit about the cases that you cover in this book and a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got involved in ufology, Steve, myself and Mark Birdsall, my colleague, investigated a UFO landing case not far from where I live, in a small town called Normanton in West Yorkshire. And it involved a lady and several children. They saw this thing land, these men in white outside of it, and off it goes. So what that did, it confirmed my interest in the subject. No longer was I having to read books about things that happened in New Mexico or Socorro, New Mexico.
Yeah, you could talk to the real witnesses.
Right? Yeah, and we went and interviewed them. This was in my back garden, my backyard, so to speak. So throughout the decades that I've been involved, Jesus Christ, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? Throughout the decades. but it's true.
I prefer the term veteran to old, right? You're a veteran journalist, and
so I would collect these cases, and wherever possible, Steve, I'd go and interview people, because a lot of it was the days before the internet, and so I just started to build them up, and I finally thought I'll put all these into one volume, because there are colleagues around the world. Well, I would say at least 90%, if not more, of the cases in this book they will probably never have heard of, and it's a shame, because if we're all trying to understand the phenomena, we've all got different parts of the puzzle, and unless we share that, we'll never see the whole picture. So one way of doing that is through books. And so come, the COVID lockdown, I thought, well, I've no excuse now. I've got all this stuff on file. I better get it into a book.
You're stuck in your house.
Yeah. So I wrote it, and originally it was going to come out 2 years ago. So you'll see on Amazon publication date 2020. That's when I just uploaded the cover, nothing else.
I have to do that for my book. That'll motivate me. I'll just upload the cover, then I'll write it. Right.
So and then I eventually thought, no, I'll publish it now. Boom, and away it went. And I'm very pleased with it. And there's been a few problems with it. I did a lot of, if you see my hands, Steve, they're not meant for typing. I still hit 3 keys in one go on the keyboard when I'm trying to write stuff. But I've had it proofread. It's back up and running, and I do apologize to anyone if you've got my sausage fingers trying to write this stuff, And like you said when we were talking before we went live, there are things in there you've never heard of before, and there are some very bizarre things as well, Steve. So I hope our colleagues around the world, especially in the United States, can take a look at it and perhaps compare it with things they've researched. Or if you're just interested in the subject, well, here's a whole bunch of new stuff you probably never heard of, and it's out now.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of anybody who's interested, there's a link to Mr. Mantle's books on Amazon in the description of this video. And I would encourage you, because the first book of his I read was thoroughly enjoyable. Couldn't put it down. I had to finish it because it was, and really that was cool because it was a piece of my childhood almost that I was reading about. It was such a big event, this alien autopsy, and I'm anxious to read this. And I think we should all support the good work that people do. People don't have to lie about their background in order to be involved and do good work in this thing and good research. Phillip Mantle is one of those good guys. I put you in the good guy list, Phillip Mantle.
Thank you.
And I got to tell you, I don't have many people in the good guy list left because it just seems like too many of these people are out there just trying to grab the UFO dollars, and they don't really do it the right way. Well,
if I probably totaled up how much I spent on this subject down the years,
you might break even, right?
And I wouldn't even come anywhere close, Steve. My wife would say, well, we could probably have had another couple of children if you hadn't spent that kind of money. You know what I mean? And so I'm not necessarily that money motivated. Obviously, when I publish books, either by myself or colleagues, I want them to be successful. And of course, if it's successful, we get royalties. I mean, that just goes with it. But I've published books that I know won't sell. in big amounts, Steve, simply because I believe that they needed to be published in the first place.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Just for history's sake, or
yeah, and I
for
believe that they need to be
documenting,
there.
you know?
And there's only me, you know, flying this press here in the UK. There's me, and that's it. You know, and I try and publish as much as I can that's never been seen before, both from the UK and around the world. I've published books from
That's
Poland.
what I like. You know, I've got so many books on Roswell or on Rendlesham or cases that everybody's heard of. I love it when I hear some new case that I've never heard of. So I'm looking forward to this book. And maybe you could come back after I read that one. I got to do my Phillip Mantle homework first, you know.
Yeah, maybe I'll still be on your good list then, Steve.
No,
you know?
I would hope so. Sure. Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, by the way, to be on your good list?
It's a very short list, so I would think it's pretty okay, right?
Yeah.
But listen, yeah. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Like I said, I'm impressed. Listen, probably I'm impressed because I've been trying to learn how to write books on this subject. And to find somebody like you you go look him up on Amazon. The link is in the description to go check out his books. And this guy writes a lot of books, you know, so I'm impressed with that. And also publishes for other people, like this person in Poland or whatever. And that's a great thing that he does for the community, because if not for Phillip, some of these lesser known people or authors from these smaller countries, we might never get that information out.
Absolutely. And I will continue to do that wherever possible, Steve. You know, simple as that.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time. And just so you know, you're like one of the only people I agreed to do an early interview with.
Thank you very much. Well, you wouldn't want to talk to me at 3 a.m. I wouldn't make any sense at all, Steve. I can assure you.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap things up here. So I appreciate your time, and I hope that you won't be a stranger and come back again soon.
All right, mate. Oh, mate. Good night.
All right. Thank you, Phillip Mantle. Great interview. Boy, listen, I always say this, friends. I have spoken to Phillip Mantle a little bit through email, but we've never had a long conversation like this, and I've wanted to. And I'm very selfish. And instead of doing it off air privately, I said, we're going to do it right on air and take all of you, my friends, with us. I want to recognize and thank you, kind and generous supporters. We have Space Cow with a $6.99 super chat, says, good stuff, Cambian and Phillip. Great info. And then we have Sidvish, 500 and okay. Finally, a show I don't have to be in the replay crew. Yeah, we're going to try to do some early ones. So listen, I got to bounce on out of here because we're coming up and my son will be getting home from school on the bus and I got to go get him. I want to thank all of our kind and generous supporters. I want to thank our excellent guest today, Phillip Mantle, for doing this. And I want to thank you because without you, it's just me talking. But I'm so glad that I could take you with me on this journey. And what a journey it has been. Always interesting to be able to take you, my friends, along with me for these conversations. I think, why have them privately? Let's just do it and let everybody listen in. And that's sort of been the model here, and it's worked very well for us. So that's all I got for you. But I want to remind you that 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, we're going to be doing a special show, which is on the latest of Linda Moulton House hoax. You may remember that we caught her using a CGI video game cover and putting it behind her paywall some time ago. She's at it again with a new fake CGI picture of an alien that she is claiming is a real alien. She even copyrighted the photo. We found the artist. We tracked down the person who actually drew the image she's saying is a photograph of a real alien, and we're going to break it all down for you tonight at 9 p.m. Linda Moulton Howe's latest hoax exposed, 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Be sure to join us. That's all I got for you for right now. Come back at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. You'll be glad you did. If you like those gotcha moments, tonight is going to be filled with them. We got her again. We got her again. And listen, friends, making a mistake like that one time is a mistake. Doing it twice to make money is a pattern. And we can't let this continue. Please do join me tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambian. Good night and God bless all of you.